Imagine dedicating more than 30 years of your life to professional wrestling, winning British, European and World Championships, helping launch British television wrestling, training the next generation, then, after what should have been just another night's work, you never make it home. This is the tragic story of Mike Marino. Hello everyone, I'm Josh Faulkner, the wrestling comedian. Make sure you like the video and drop me a follow. Now, let's talk about the man many wrestlers simply called Mr. Wrestling. If you ask older wrestling fans to name Britain's greatest technical wrestler, chances are they won't say Big Daddy, they won't say Giant Haystacks, but they will say Mike Marino, because while Daddy sold the tickets, Mike Marino earned the respect. Born Michael Harrison in London in 1921 to an Italian family, he originally boxed before turning to professional wrestling after the Second World War. Using the name Mike Marino and later being billed as the Anglo-Italian from Milan, he quickly became one of Britain's finest technicians. He wasn't just popular, he was historic. When ITV first broadcast professional wrestling in November 1955, Mike Marino was one of the two wrestlers chosen for Britain's very first televised wrestling match. Think about that. British wrestling on television literally began with Mike Marino. Over the next 3 decades, he became one of the biggest names in the country. He wrestled at the Royal Albert Hall, he travelled across Europe, he wrestled legends including Bert Asarati, Georges Gordienko, and even wrestled the legendary Lou Thesz to a time-limit draw. By the end of his career, he held the British, European and World Mid-Heavyweight Championships simultaneously. That's how highly regarded he was. But Mike Marino wasn't just a champion, he was a teacher, a mentor, a matchmaker, someone younger wrestlers looked up to. People often described him as the complete professional, the man who always knew exactly how wrestling should be done. Then came August 1981. Mike was booked to wrestle at the Leeds Cliff Hall in Folkestone. His opponent was scheduled to be Big Jim Harris, but before the match, something wasn't right. His tongue had become badly swollen. Promoters insisted he couldn't wrestle and he was taken to Ashford Hospital for treatment. Doctors treated him. Mike insisted on leaving. He didn't want to stay in hospital. Instead, he began the journey home to South London with fellow wrestler Mal Sanders behind the wheel. Then, tragedy struck. Travelling along the M20, Mike suddenly suffered a massive convulsive attack. Mal Sanders immediately stopped the car. He desperately tried to save his friend. Right there, on the hard shoulder of the motorway. Imagine that, one of Britain's finest wrestlers being given CPR by one of his closest friends on the side of the road after a wrestling show. Despite every effort, Mike Marino died that night. He was 59 years old. Only afterwards was the full extent of his illness discovered. He had been suffering from leukemia. The swollen tongue that had prevented him from wrestling that evening was one of the symptoms of the disease. British wrestling was devastated, not just because it had lost a champion, but because it had lost one of its true gentlemen. A man respected in every dressing room, a man who had given virtually his entire adult life to wrestling. Just weeks later, Dale Martin Promotions created the Mike Marino Memorial Shield. A one-night tournament was held at the Fairfield Halls in Croydon to honour his memory, and fittingly, the man who won it, Mal Sanders, the very same man who had been driving that night and had tried so desperately to save his friend. And to me, that's what makes this story so powerful. We often remember championships, we remember rivalries, we remember famous matches, but sometimes the stories behind the curtain remind us these weren't just wrestling characters. They were real people, real friends who spent thousands of miles traveling Britain's roads together simply because they loved professional wrestling. Mike Marino may not be remembered by younger fans today, but speak to anyone who wrestled him or anyone who watched him in his prime and they'll tell you exactly the same thing. He wasn't just one of Britain's greatest wrestlers, he was one of Britain's greatest professionals. But I want to hear from you. What are your memories of Mike Marino? Or, if this is the first time you've heard his story, who else from British wrestling history deserves a video? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more wrestling stories, opinions, and laughs, you know what to do. And remember, I'll see you on the next one.